Donald Trump celebrated last night after a Colorado judge rejected an attempt to remove him from the state's primary ballot. But the judge's ruling also offered a searing condemnation of Trump's actions, saying he, quote, engaged in an insurrection on January 6, 2021. Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He was the lead manager of Trump's second impeachment. And Congressman, I'll get to that ruling in a moment. I also want to talk about Israel. But you wanted to weigh in on the interview I just did with Governor DeSantis, specifically about Elon Musk. What did you want to say?
Well, the guy's running for president, and Elon Musk did that on Wednesday. It's Sunday, so this is 4 days later, and he has not had the chance to read what Elon Musk wrote. That is very hard for me to believe. In any event, you showed it to him, and he still refused to condemn it. So if you're serious about condemning and confronting anti-Semitism and racism and these bigotries, which are the gateway to destruction of liberal democracy, you've got to be explicit and open and full-throated about it, and you've got to denounce anti-Semitism and racism across the board.
What was your reaction to what Elon Musk's?
I thought it was outrageous and dangerous. And, you know, we'll be taking action with colleagues this week to write to him, to ask him to renounce those comments and to clean up his act.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the white replacement theory, and I got a lot of other topics I want to talk about, white replacement theory and the white genocide, all that nonsense is like that stuff gets people killed at the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting, the El Paso shooting, the Buffalo shooting. So anyway, moving on. Let's start with Israel, because you called for the immediate release of all hostages, an immediate cessation of hostilities against any civilian targets, and a mutually agreed upon ceasefire. Now, let's unpack that. Israel denies that they're targeting any civilian targets. They say they're going after Hamas, and Hamas embeds in civilian within the civilian populace. So I'm wondering, when you call for immediate cessation of hostilities against any civilian targets, are you saying the Israelis are not telling the truth? What are you suggesting?
Well, we know that there have been more than 11,000 casualties on the Palestinian side.
So you believe the Palestinian Ministry of Health's figures?
I mean, if it were half of that, it is still an absolute tragedy.
Absolutely.
But, so, you know, I'm not interested in the game of playing with numbers. I mean, if you just open your eyes, you can see there are terrible casualties taking place. The hostages must be released. That is a humanitarian crisis in itself. There is a humanitarian crisis within Gaza. The world is demanding that there be action so that there be humanitarian relief. And I'm glad that Israel, the administration, and people negotiating on the other side appear to be on the precipice of release of dozens of hostages, probably women and children, and also a break in the fighting for 5 or 6 days is what we've been hearing. So that moves things in the right direction. But another point that I made was we need to have the removal of the terrorist death cult Hamas from operational control in Gaza. I mean,
but who does that?
Well,
if Israel doesn't do that, who does that?
Well, we're in a place where we need every actor and everybody in the world to be concentrated on that. Hamas has got to go.
But they've been there since 2006, 2007. Egypt's there.
Yes.
They set up a blockade. Yeah. Jordan's there. You know, Syria's there. Lebanon's there, the UAE's there, Saudi Arabia's there, Bahrain's there. Nobody has done anything to get rid of Hamas there.
Including Prime Minister Netanyahu, who thought that he could lean towards Hamas and use that as part of a divide and conquer strategy. And the world has got to get beyond that kind of absurd power politics. It is a terrorist medieval death cult which just assassinated more than 1,200 Israelis.
So you think there should be a ceasefire, and in exchange for the ceasefire, the Israelis get back their hostages, and Hamas goes?
Yeah, the underlying, yes, that is part of it.
Of course.
That is part of it, but the underlying political dynamic is that there must be a recognition of the interest of the people in Gaza to democracy, to freedom, and their rights. So there's got to be a democratic Palestinian state that emerges from this nightmare that is safe and secure, and we have a safe and secure Israel to go with it. Otherwise, we're going to keep reenacting this cycle of bloody violence and revenge forever. So this is an opportunity, and I think that President Biden and Secretary Blinken and people all over the world see it, to get beyond this kind of madness. I mean, I saw the tape that was made of the slashing, homicidal terrorist attacks that took place in Israel, and it's like we have 21st century technology, but 14th century brains, and we've got to be a lot smarter about where we are now.
Let me tell you, there's worse stuff than that. That stuff is awful, but there's actually worse stuff than that. But I want to ask you about the video this week of the pro-Palestinian protest outside the DNC that turned violent outside the Democratic headquarters. And there were members in there, not all of them, but some of them were with the Democratic Socialists of America, the New York branch, which celebrated on October 7th, saying that it was legitimate resistance. At another rally just down the street from here at Union Station, crowds were chanting "From the river to the sea, long live the Intifada." What do you make of this as a Jewish American, a proud progressive, a Democrat? There's anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party these days.
Well, I mean, there's anti-Semitism everywhere these days, as we were discussing with Elon Musk. And I mean, we're talking about a problem that goes back thousands of years, obviously. I was very disappointed to see what happened over at the DNC the other day. I mean, I'm glad that there are young people who are taking an interest in peace and social justice, and those people I encourage. But for those who are somehow tempted to engage in pushing and shoving, like you know, Kevin McCarthy in Congress, but doing it outside, I'm totally opposed to that. They should study the history of nonviolent movements in America, like the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the LGBTQ movement, the environmental movement, that have been the great civilizing movements of our time and of American history that have transformed things, and that does work better than violence.
Speaking of violence, on Friday, a Colorado judge rejected an effort to leave Trump off the 2024 ballot using the 14th Amendment. But I want to read from the ruling, quote, "The court concludes Trump acted with the specific intent to incite political violence and directed at the Capitol with the purpose of disrupting the electoral certification. Consequently, the court finds that the petitioners have established Trump engaged in an insurrection on January 6, 2021. Is that legally significant?
Of course it is, and they found exactly what the House of Representatives found when we impeached Donald Trump for inciting insurrection against the Constitution and against the Union. It's what 57 of 100 senators found in voting to convict Trump on those same charges. And that is the paradigm act of domestic violence of our time, which Republicans like DeSantis will never reject or renounce or denounce. So everything else that they say about it is phony, because that goes right to the heart of our union. Now, the Colorado court's decision was amazing, because it said there's no doubt that Donald Trump incited insurrection against the union within the meaning of the 14th Amendment, Section 3. But the court said it doubted whether or not the president is actually covered by that language, whether the president is a civil or military officer of the United States. I mean, that to me is preposterous. In fact, the judge herself said it sounds preposterous. And I think that that's the issue now that we're going to zero in on. Does the 14th Amendment apply to everybody who holds office in America, or does it apply to everybody except for the President of the United States, the one person who would be best positioned to try to overthrow the government, as we saw in January of 2021.
Congressman Raskin, thank you so much for being here. And for anybody wondering at home, I already asked him, and his cancer is in remission, which is wonderful news. Have a great Thanksgiving with your family.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
Thank you for being here.